And then by choice, you can watch the resistance move through you. You can feel the resistance pass through you. And after it does pass through you, then you're free to do whatever you want. Well, what if you say, Dana, what if I don't want it to pass through me? What if I want to hang on to it? It's my God-given right. I can hold on to it as long as I want. Can't I? Yes, you can. And my only advice then would be, if you're going to hang on to some resistance, have a really good reason for it. Because you're going to be wasting a lot of precious energy holding on to that. Because whenever we were resisting something, we are not at the center. We are not in balance, and we are not at peace. So have a good reason for what you resist. And then have fun. Resist away. This regular practice, this deep, conscious practice of releasing resistance is a spiritual path unto itself. There are some takeaways in every message, things that I come here hoping to take away. And this is one of them. The knowledge that the constant, ongoing inner release of resistance is a spiritual path unto itself. And it's a high-level spiritual path. The Chinese sage Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching in the 6th century. He wrote it about 100 years before Gautama Buddha lived. The Tao, as it's called for short, is a treatise on the yin and the yang, or yang if you prefer, on the feminine and the masculine, on the dark and the light. It's a treatise on balance. It's a treatise on living at the center. It's a treatise on balance. Because the Tao means the way. The Tao is the middle way. Each one of you is on the Tao right now. You're on the Tao by affirmation. You affirmed it earlier. As soon as you affirm that you're willing to live, learning how to be free of stress and problems and fears and melodrama, you are affirming that you're on the Tao. On the Tao or you're in the Tao. I say both, but I like in the Tao. Because it's really a space. It's more than a path that you're on. It's a space that you occupy. What is the Tao? I can only approach it through examples and questions because the Tao, you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can only tap around its edges. So, by example, is it good sometimes to eat? These are not trick questions I'm asking. Is it good to never eat? No. Somewhere in between is the Tao. We passed over the Tao between it's good to sometimes eat and never eating. Somewhere in between is the Tao. There's a pendulum. Everything in life has extremes. Everything. We know if we pull a pendulum 30 degrees this far and let go, it'll come 30 degrees out here. We know that if we pull a pendulum this far in this direction, it'll go the same direction that far in the other direction. Everything in life has these extremes. Where is the Tao? The Tao is in the middle. Where is the power in life? It's in the middle. Where's the peace in life? It's in the middle. But we have a tendency, or some of us have a tendency, to move through these extremes of life. How many here like hot weather? How about 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit? You'd vaporize instantly. How many like cold weather? How about absolute zero? Yeah, the molecules of your body would freeze and they would never move again. We can't survive at the extremes. How long can a pendulum remain at an extreme? Just for a moment, right? How long can a pendulum remain in the middle at rest? Forever. Forever. An eternity. Where is the peace? Where is the power? Where is the rest? It's in the middle. If, let's say you're starving. You are out in the wilderness for 5 days. No food, no water. You got this picture? 5 days. You're rescued. They bring you back to the tent. You're sitting on a chair. There's a little portable table in front of you, and somebody puts food in front of you. Do you think you're going to be using table manners to eat? There's a knife and fork there. Do you think you're going to be using them? No. You're starving. You are starving. You are going to be stuffing food into your mouth like an animal. To what degree? To what degree are you going to act and eat like an animal? To the exact degree that you were starved enough to awaken the animal instincts for survival within you. It's another pendulum. It's another pendulum. As much as you were starved, that's how animalistic you will be. Now this is not a morality tale I'm sharing. There's no judgment about this behavior. It simply is. The laws out there, the outer law, always matches the inner law. Always. There's only one law. How do you know when you're on the dial? When you're at peace. How do you know when you're not on the dial? When you're pushing or pulling and not at peace. Jesus said, you can command this mountain to move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing shall be impossible to you. The mountain that Jesus was speaking of is whatever in your life you are pushing or pulling. That's the mountain. And you can say, get out of my sight, my mind, my heart, my path. All things that I resist, and they will be removed. They will be removed as you choose to release your resistance. That's the mountain. It's the resistance in your mind. And you can move it. And nothing shall be impossible to you. The Tao is always in the center, but it's not always still. You may have you've used my little example here and accepted the fact that my arm and my hand are a pendulum. and it looks, at rest, so it looks like it's not moving. But I said you can do whatever you want. The Tao is always at center, always in the middle, always at peace, but it is not still. And again, we can only talk about the Tao in terms of metaphor. And the perfect metaphor to describe what I'm speaking of is sailing. How many of you have ever sailed on a sailboat? If you're on a sailboat and there's no wind, where are you going? Nowhere. If you're on a sailboat and there's a great strong wind and you have no sail, you're going nowhere fast, right? If you're on a sailboat and, see, in sailing, there are all these elements that come together. You have the wind, you have the sail, you have the rudder, and you have the ropes that place tension upon the sails. And those are all working together. So when you are sailing, and you've got a wind, and the sail's up, if you hold the sail too loosely, sheet will luff, right? And you won't go anywhere. So if you pull it in and you pull it in too tight, then the sheet becomes flattened. What'll happen? You'll tip over in a strong wind. So what do you need to do? You need to hold the ropes on the sail just right. Not too tight, not too loose. Just right. And when you do, it's at that center point of the tautness created by the wind on the sail that causes you to start to move and glide easily, gently, effortlessly through the water. That center point, that's the dial. And you're sailing on and on and on, and picking up more and more speed, and all of a sudden, something happens. The wind shifts. It's coming from another direction. You make an adjustment. You regain that sweet spot in the sail, and you continue on. The Tao is always at the center. It's always at peace. It's the source of all power. And it's not still. It changes. So how do we stop our personal pendulums from swinging to extremes? By leaving them alone. By leaving them alone. By not feeding the energy that takes them to extremes. Has somebody ever told you something, or you learned something, you heard something, it's a real tidbit, it's juicy, and you just had to tell somebody? You just had to tell someone. We call that gossip. Or has anybody ever hurt you, and you felt that you had to hurt them back? Some of you know, and not all of you, that I have an absolutely non-lethal disease. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes when I eat fish, I smell like a fish. And there's no pill to take to fix it. So trust me, I never, ever, ever eat fish on a Saturday night. Under pain of starvation, I won't. Well, a number of years ago, I broke up with a girlfriend, and I called her to explain why. And she was very grateful to me for explaining myself, for having a real, a mature adult conversation as to why I thought our relationship should continue. And we had a good and a decent, the conversation of decent length. And just before she hung up, she said, "Oh, and one more thing. You think shrimp doesn't affect you. Well, let me tell you, it does." Those are the kinds of extremes I'm talking about. That's what we become conscious of. That's what we pay attention to, those things moving in us. You see, when things look confusing, it's really not because life is confusing, it's because we're confused. Life is in divine order. We can show up, watch life move through us, move through us. We can have the experience of everything in life. Let it pass through us and live in peace in all circumstances. This is what the spiritual masters are saying now, and they always have. What does life look like when we live this way, when we stop being confused? I'm going to read this out loud. If you want, you can read along with